There's something weirdly heartbreaking about seeing Rex still wearing that blue striped helmet long after the war ended. Like, dude, you're not even on the payroll anymore. The Republic's dead, the Jedi are toast, and Palpatine turned your 401k into a galactic dictatorship. Yet you're still suiting up like you've got briefing at 0600, and Cody's going to be late again. At first, it just seems like a cool visual, you know? The battle-hardened clone still rocking his gear like it's muscle memory. But then you really think about it, and it hits different. That armor isn't just protection, it's identity. And when your whole life has been one long mission, it's not that easy to take the armor off and suddenly be, what? A guy with a bucket hat and no job. And it's not just Rex. Wolf's still got the visor. Gregor's out here looking like Mad Max with a head injury. Even the Bad Batch hang on to their look like it's the only thing holding them together. It's like they all made peace with being out of place, as long as they didn't have to look out of place too, which is kind of tragic. And also really human. But let's not ignore how strange it is that nobody ever said, hey, maybe we shouldn't keep wearing the symbol of the army that tried to erase us. Like, come on. The second you remove your chip and realize you almost wiped out your Jedi bestie, maybe throw the armor in a fire and go find a hoodie or something. Or at least get a new paint job so people don't flinch when you walk into town. Still, I get it, when everything else is gone. The armor's the last piece of home, even if it's a haunted one. You spend your life fighting in it, bleeding in it, burying friends in it, and then the war ends. But the ghosts don't. So yeah, maybe keeping it on feels safer than facing who you are without it. In this video, we're unpacking the meaning behind the clones keeping their Republic armor after the fall, why they wore it, what it cost them, and why letting go of it might have been the hardest battle they never fought. Because sometimes survival means taking the armor off, but healing means figuring out why you kept it on in the first place. Ever notice how, even after the Republic fell, a lot of clones just kept the look? Same bucket, same chest plate, same colors and paint jobs. Like the Clone Wars were still happening on some distant moon nobody bothered to update them about. It's one of those details you brush past the first time. But the second you actually think about it, you can't stop asking why. I mean, we're talking about a galaxy that got turned upside down. The Jedi were hunted down. The Senate became a rubber stamp for a tyrant. And the clones who managed to break free from the Empire's grip were walking around like they still worked for the Chancellor. Why didn't they ditch the armor, or at least repaint it into something less traumatic? Take Rex, for example. Post-Order 66. The man literally removed his inhibitor chip and went into hiding. But he still showed up in Rebels with that same blue-striped Phase 2 helmet. It's not like he couldn't get something else. He's resourceful, he knows people, but instead he's out here looking like a living war relic. And then there's Wolf and Gregor, holed up in that Walker-turned house on silos. Still in armor, still clinging to the past like it was a warm blanket. But was it comfort or denial? Were they wearing it because it was all they knew? Or because they didn't know who they were without it? There's something fascinating about how they kept the uniform, even when the war was over. Like they needed the armor to feel real again, to feel like they still had purpose. But at some point, you have to ask if holding on that tightly is really surviving at all. Honestly though, it's kind of maddening to watch. These are some of the most capable soldiers in the galaxy, and yet they're stuck in this weird cosplay limbo, like they're trying to LARP their way through trauma. And it's not just a matter of fashion, it's a refusal to move forward. A stubborn, silent scream that says, this was the last time I mattered. Like, how do you remove your chip, defy the Empire, survive being hunted by your own brothers, and then willingly put the same armor back on the next day? That's not resilience. That's regression. And I get it. Identity is complicated. But if your gear represents a war you were manipulated into, why are you still marching around in it? And that's where it really hits you. Because this isn't about clothes or armor anymore. It's about memory. It's about grief. The clones didn't just lose a war. They lost everything that gave their lives, meaning their purpose, their brothers, their trust, and in some cases, their minds. Keeping the armor wasn't about holding on to glory. It was about refusing to bury the past. Because if they did, what would be left? These were men designed to fight, conditioned to obey, and then discarded, like outdated tech, the second the war ended. Is it any wonder they kept the only thing they still recognized in the mirror? Imagine waking up every day and knowing that your face, your voice, your entire identity was manufactured to serve someone else's lie. Now imagine trying to rebuild a life from that starting point, without the only familiar thing you've ever worn. That's not just hard, it's heartbreaking. When you see Rex hesitate before helping the Ghost crew, or hear Wolf's paranoia flare up in front of Kanan, or watch Gregor slip between clarity and confusion. It's not just damage, it's mourning. They're haunted by who they were, and terrified of who they might become. So yeah, they wore the armor because it hurt less than being naked in a galaxy that forgot them. It was their last defense, not against blasters, but against the ache of being left behind. Still, you can't help but be amazed at what they managed to do, despite all that. These weren't just broken men clinging to scrap metal. They were warriors who survived the impossible and kept going, because even in old armor, they still made new choices. Brave ones. Rex didn't have to help the Ghost crew, but he did. Wolf didn't have to warn them about Vader, but he did. Gregor didn't have to lay down his life in the final battle for Lothal, but he did. These weren't clones stuck in the past. They were soldiers who carried it into the future, and used it to protect something better. And there's something incredible about that, because it proves that the armor didn't define them. Even when they thought it did, they wore it, but they weren't trapped by it. They may not have let go, but they still rose up. They still chose to fight for something real, not because they were programmed to, but because they believed in it. The Republic failed them. The Empire betrayed them, but they kept pushing forward anyway, with scratched helmets, faded paint, and hearts that somehow still had room for loyalty and hope. That's not weakness, that's power, and it's the kind of strength you don't get from training. It comes from surviving your own story. There's something kind of beautiful about that idea, that healing doesn't always mean starting fresh. Sometimes it means carrying the past with you and finding a way to walk anyway. The clones didn't have a blank slate, they had a cracked one, and somehow they still found a way to draw a new future. We see that in Rex most of all. He's fighting alongside the rebellion, standing with Ahsoka, choosing again and again to protect people, even when nobody asked him to. That's a man who found purpose again, not because someone handed it to him, but because he reached for it. Armor and all. Even Wolf, who was clearly more hesitant, stayed loyal to Rex, stayed watchful, stayed ready, and Gregor, wild as ever, still charged into battle one last time with that unmistakable laugh. Like even in their lowest moments, there was still a spark, a choice, a chance. And that's what makes their story matter. It wasn't about ditching the armor to prove they'd changed. It was about choosing to do good anyway, about rising above the story they were given, and writing one they could believe in. Maybe that's the hope the armor held, not as a cage, but as a reminder that even if you were born to fight, you can still choose who you fight for. But still, there's no getting around the tragedy, because for all the courage and growth, that armor was a symbol of a war that never should have happened. A uniform worn by men who were used, discarded, and forgotten. And every time we see it again, it reminds us how much was lost. Rex may have found meaning, but he never stopped grieving. Wolf may have lived through it, but the fear never left his eyes. Gregor may have died laughing, but he still died fighting. The armor wasn't just a reminder of where they came from. It was proof of what the galaxy took from them, and even though they made peace with it, we don't have to. We can see the weight they carried and ask why it was ever placed on their shoulders in the first place. We can love them for surviving, and still hate the system that forced them to, because that's the resolution we're left with. The clones didn't get justice, they got silence. But in that silence, they spoke anyway. Not with words, but with choices, with sacrifices. With that battered armor they never took off. And maybe that's the final message. You can't always take off the past, but you can choose what you do with it. And if you're lucky, maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my videos, please consider looking at my pinned comment and checking out the links for my Amazon storefront. It contains my favorite Legos, my gear in which I make videos, and comics that I read on a daily basis. I update it constantly, so please, take a moment and click on the link. On top of that, check out my second channel, Critical Analysis Hub Plus, and my third channel, Critical Analysis Hub XP. Just one click would go on a long way in supporting my channels and future in YouTube.